Welcome to In This Family, where I have in-depth conversations with fascinating people about mental health, family, the past, and the future. I'm Dr. Michelle K. Murray, President and CEO of Nexus Family Healing, a licensed marriage and family therapist, and your host. In This Family is presented by Nexus Family Healing. We are a national nonprofit mental health organization who helps youth and families heal from trauma and complex mental health challenges. We believe every child is worth it and every family matters. Whatever situation you are raised in as a child will feel quite normal to you because you're a child. It's all you've ever known. Only later, into adolescence and adulthood, can one start to understand that things might not have been normal after all, especially if you were raised by a parent with a severe mental illness. Fortunately, it's never too late to learn about mental illness and its effects. It's never too late to do some reading, get some therapy, really explore what happened. It's a great way to make sense of what you're going through now and what your future might look like. Sarah LaBrie's is a writer in Los Angeles. She works in television and she's the author of a memoir, No One Gets to Fall Apart. In it, Sarah tells the story of growing up in Houston with a mother who was increasingly unstable and who would later be diagnosed with schizophrenia and may have even been dealing with borderline personality disorder. It's also the story of an aunt and grandmother who loved her and helped take care of her, and about Sarah's ongoing efforts to make sense of her mother and herself. Sarah LaBrie's, welcome to In This Family.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
So this show's about mental health and families. So I thought maybe before I get into too many specific questions, if maybe you could set the stage for our listeners about who your family is, your immediate family.
Yeah, I think my immediate family, the meaning of that is maybe a little non-traditional for me. I was raised by my mom, but my grandmother and my aunt were basically also my parents. I spent as much time with them as I did with my mother for most of my childhood. And yeah, everyone lives in Houston. My grandmother was actually the first Black female district attorney in Houston, I want to say. She worked in housing law for a while and then wound up becoming a natural health practitioner. And she bought basically a big, sprawling fourplex in Third Ward, which was kind of the hub of African American culture in Houston. And I lived there growing up. My aunt lived there. My mom lived there. My grandmother actually lives there now. So, yeah, that was basically my situation being raised.
And I know your book is really about your mom and her mental health and what you went through. So I wondered if you could maybe describe that phone call that you got about your mother.
This was, I want to say, 8 years ago at this point. I had not been speaking to my mom. I was in my early 30s and we'd had a really contentious relationship as I entered adulthood, especially, but my childhood was also really rough and we were fully estranged. And, maybe a couple years in to that, I got a call from my grandmother saying that my mother had been found on the side of the road screaming because she believed that FBI agents or police officers were chasing her down the highway and that they had been for months. And I learned at that time that she had been sleeping in her car, that she'd slept at the airport, that she had mentally deteriorated to a point where she didn't always recognize my family and had been hospitalized basically. And my family was at a loss. No one was familiar at that point with what schizophrenia was. We had no idea what was going on.
And how old was your mom when this incident occurred?
53.
And how long have you two been estranged?
About, I want to say 3 years at that point. It had been maybe 2 years. It had been, the origin of our estrangement was that I got my first big writing job that I was really excited about. I was co-writing a libretto for an opera company in Los Angeles, and she came and she was really, I felt like she was really proud of me, and I thought it would be really healing for our relationship for her to see that, all of our hard work together had paid off. I was a real artist, and her reaction to it was really ended up sort of being really terrifying and strange. And she either hallucinated or projected onto me this whole strange storyline that I was cheating on my then boyfriend, now husband, with one of the actors in the show. And I got really scared and frustrated. This was a big moment for me. And I didn't really understand what was going on at the time. So I thought I couldn't trust her anymore. And I wound up just basically cutting her out.
And when you look back on that and then knowing, once she got the diagnosis of schizophrenia, had you looked back on that incident any differently?
Yeah, so that was part of the reason I wrote the book. I wanted other people to be able to recognize the signs. I had no idea what was happening at that time. And growing up, she would be um, there would be erratic behavior, and the idea was just that, oh, she's mean, she's stressed out from work, she's angry. But I think what we were dealing with were signs of borderline personality disorder. But it just never even occurred to us to look into it. We didn't know. Um, and yeah, I guess when all of this was happening and I was looking for resources, I had a really hard time finding a guide for what happens when you're in your early 30s and your mom's in her 50s and is suddenly hallucinating full freight stories, things that never happened. So I didn't want other people to be caught out and unaware the way I was.
Well, it's wonderful to put voice to this because it can be really confusing and challenging for people. And you mentioned your childhood, so can we kind of go back to what's the earliest age that you remember that maybe something just wasn't right with your mom?
I think when I was little, we were really close. As I got older, and as often happens with, I'm saying borderline personality disorder because I think she was a textbook case, but she was never diagnosed because she wouldn't go to a mental health professional. As I got older and started to move away from her, spend more time with my friends, disagree with her more, things got really difficult. She would get really angry with me over the smallest things and just be really cruel. There were just strange moments. I remember one time I was walking around barefoot in our house, as I had a million times before, and she started screaming at me to put shoes on. And it was just a sort of, at the time, that didn't make any sense to me. But then later, when I learned what borderline personality disorder was, and I read books like Stop Walking on Eggshells, I found out, okay, this is pretty textbook. These sort of moments of it's called splitting, I think, where the person either loves you and basically treats you like you're the best thing in the world, which my mom would sometimes do, or decides that you're the devil, that you shouldn't even be around. Um, that sort of flipping was really disorienting for me as a kid, but again, is just a symptom of this disorder that I didn't know about, and I really am hoping to raise awareness about.
And how did you make sense of your mom's erratic behavior? Do you remember the things you were saying to yourself or feeling?
It was really hard for me. I thought it was my fault. And that's another thing that I think is really common. I thought, oh, I must be doing something wrong, not wearing shoes in the house, but I haven't worn shoes in the house for my whole life. Or another example was one time I left the microwave door open and the light was on, and she refused to let me go to one of my best friend's birthday parties because I'd left the microwave door open. And that was really strange. But at the time, I was like, oh, I just shouldn't leave the microwave door open. Um, so that kind of thing. I think I would just try to be more perfect, and I really excelled in school. I did a ton of extracurriculars. I was really a huge overachiever because I thought if I could just be better, then I could make whatever was happening between us stop.
Yeah, that would be such a powerful thought to have as a child is let me just do this differently. Let me do this better. Maybe that will be better. Did you and your mom ever talk about this, about your relationship and what was going on at different times?
We would try. I think it's hard though, because I think another symptom of BPD is this the sense of kind of the world falling away. If someone criticizes you, there was just this sense that she couldn't handle the conversation and she would get really upset. And sometimes she would apologize, but then 2 seconds later she'd be like, I'm not sorry. This is actually your fault. And it was just because there's this sense, I think, from the reading I've done, that there's kind of a hole, like a lack, like a wanting inside of her that could not be filled. And there was a fear of her disappearing inside of it and just slipping away if she were to acknowledge her behavior or the fault lines in our relationship. So she couldn't look directly at them, and it was never worth it ever to try to have that conversation.
And you said that your grandmother and your aunt were pivotal also as part of your family. Did you talk to them about this, or did they talk to you about what was going on for your mom?
Yeah, they were aware, and I do want to make it clear that I was, loved fiercely. I was taken care of. I mean, my grandmother went above and beyond, did everything she could for me. As an only child, I was beyond spoiled. I went to theater camp, creative writing camp. She would take me traveling around the world, because she had the resources to do that. She made sure that I went to a really good school. That meant that I would then have a launch pad for getting out of Houston and professionalizing. I mean, she really, really cared for me. And I think it was partly in response because she saw that my mom was not fully able to do that. And my aunt is the funniest person in the world. And if my mom was being horrible to me, she would turn it into a joke, or she would take me to lunch at a fancy restaurant. And she just made sure that I knew that I was special and that I mattered, and that the way that my mom was treating me was not reflective of who I was as a person.
Wow, what a great support to have in your life. How critical. Your aunt is your mom's sister?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So she knew. I mean, she'd grown up. She's 2 years younger than my mom, so she was aware. I think growing up with my mom had been very difficult for her, and she's a really resilient person. She just has a really happy, kind, optimistic spirit. So she had a million friends, but I think it was painful for her to have an older sister that she couldn't really connect with, even though she really wanted to.
Yeah. Did she ever tell you stories about growing up and different things that would happen between her and your mom or just with your mom?
Yeah, so she would, I mean, the sort of typical older sibling, younger sibling thing where my aunt would try and go into my mom's room and borrow her clothes or something and get kicked out and or get locked out. But I think my mom was really, really mean about it. But then I think sort of the story that always sticks in my mind, because I think it could be kind of the origin point for all of this, is that my mom, my mom's dad, my grandfather, died mysteriously when my mom was a teenager. And he was by that point divorced from my grandmother. He wasn't really in my mom and aunt's lives. So my aunt's reaction was, to feel kind of sad, but not really internalize it that much. But my mom went into her closet and stayed there like all day, just locked herself in her closet and was devastated. And nobody in the family ever really talked about it because my grandmother was, my grandfather had been abusive towards my grandmother, and she'd spent a lot of time, and it had been a lot of work to extricate herself and the kids from him. So my grandmother didn't grieve in any way. And I think it was hard for her to be there for my mom when the situation was so fraught for her.
Yeah. So I think it's great that you had that resiliency around you to buoy you up and support you during that time. And I'm really sorry to hear about your grandfather too. That sounds like a lot. And the closet is a bit of a theme in your life. Your mom having that experience of locking herself in the closet to deal with her grief. Tell us about the closet experience that you had with your mom.
So she would get mad at me and put me in the closet and close the door. And I would just kind of be stuck there with whatever I could find in the closet to play with. And that was obviously her kind of recreating her own trauma again. Also, I'm sure just the difficulty of being a single mom with a little kid and not not knowing how to ask for help, or because my grandmother was downstairs, like she could have just sent me there, but I don't know. She didn't really know how to handle big emotions or waves of stress.
And how often did that happen for you?
It was pretty often. I mean, I preferred that to other punishments. I mean, she used to spank me with a belt, but this was at a time when I think that kind of punishment was maybe a little bit more mainstream. But she would spank me, she would scream at me, she would rant, and that was really the worst because it's the hardest to describe. I think unless you've been on the other end of a rant like that, of a parent with BPD yelling at you, it's not normal. It's not normal yelling. It feels like it never ends. They're really trying to say things to hurt you. if you cry, it seems like that just sort of strengthens them and makes them want to do it more. And it's not whatever the term yelling, she would call it fussing. She'd be like, oh, I know I fuss at you a lot. But it was more than that. And I don't think we really have the language for that because it's not an experience. I still don't really feel like I understand how to describe it, but I feel like it's common. I'm in this Reddit group, where I was when I was on Reddit, um, for people with narcissistic or BPD moms, and they'll post these screenshots of text rants that their parents will go on, and it feels very familiar to me. Like now, those conversations are taking place over text, but if you've ever seen anything like that, or you just get this barrage of texts, or as an adult, I would get like barrages of emails from my mom just saying like the cruelest things, like things designed to hurt you. And that was, especially as a little kid, I didn't know how to handle that. That was a million times worse in the closet.
Yeah, that's a lot. Thank you for sharing that with us. Those are some powerful stories and experiences.
I hope it's helpful. I really just want other people to feel seen and understand. I don't know. I think maybe because it's a women's mental health or something, these issues just get written off. And then sometimes I'll see in the news somebody acting erratically and it'll become a joke, and I'll recognize like, no, this person is suffering from a severe mental illness and they need treatment, they need medication, they need help.
Yeah,
Not something to mock.
yeah, for sure. What are the things that teens might notice among a family member or a parent who's borderline who just doesn't really know what's going on?
Right. At the time, I thought it was bipolar because I didn't really know what borderline was. But one thing I did notice was things would be fine. She'd be driving me to school, things would be fine. And then suddenly things would really not be fine. And she'd be very angry. And I would be searching for what I had said or what I had done. And if you're in a situation like that, honestly, it's not your fault. You haven't said or done anything. It's the other person's brain, and they're not aware of their limitations. They don't know what they're going through, but they'll blame you because of their own internal emotional state. They're looking for a reason why they're flipping like this, why the mood swings are so crazy. So they're casting it out for a reason, and that's going to land on you because you're in the vicinity, but it's not you. There's also a really great book called Understanding the Borderline Mother that I really recommend to anyone who even thinks they might be in this position. It's yeah, I think it's sort of a critical book to read to help understand your situation and your mother's.
Yeah, we can put that maybe in the episode notes. That'd be great. Great resource for people. So she would have been an adult when she was showing the signs of the borderline. Is it possible that that was also the schizophrenia then too?
I wonder. I know I'm not a therapist, I'm not a psychiatrist, and it's been very difficult to get her to see a psychiatrist aside from the times when she's hospitalized. And usually they're just trying to get her kind of under control and medicated. So I am speaking as a layperson, but I know such a thing as psychotic depression. I mean, that could have been an element. There's this moment I remember when there was this confusion where she'd picked me up from the airport. I was coming home to visit from college, and I come outside to her car and I realized I picked up the wrong luggage. I picked up an identical piece of luggage to mine, and someone else had my luggage. And I was really upset because that luggage that I thought I had lost had library books in it, like a lot of library books that I needed for the time that I was going to be home. And then I was worried about having to pay for them if I couldn't return them to the library. And so I was really upset. And after my mom dropped me off, I was staying with my grandmother because at that time she was living in a place that would have been completely uninhabitable for me, for another person. After she dropped me off, she didn't speak to me again for the whole week that I was home from college. And it turned out that she thought, because I was upset, she understood that as me being upset with her, and she thought that I had thrown a phone at her in frustration, and I hadn't. There was this whole thing where she thought I'd called her stupid, and I hadn't, and she was just projecting all of that onto me. That was a pure hallucination that came from my distress that I think she had sensed and then turned into this fully other situation. So it's a spectrum, right? At that time, I would not have called that a delusion. I wouldn't have known to call it a delusion or a hallucination. even though that is in retrospect very clearly what it was, I can understand that now, that she had completely hallucinated a scenario that was not real just based on her emotional state. So yeah, it's definitely a spectrum. It's an evolutionary process. I don't think, I don't even think whatever, even experts in this field, I don't think really know what constitutes schizophrenia and what doesn't. It's a messy border. So what can you really say? You can't always define it.
So it sounds like for your mom, at least, there's delusions, hallucinations. Are they visual, verbal, all of the above?
Yeah, so last time I talked to her about this, and this was before she'd been hospitalized or treated, it was interesting the way she described it. She said it was almost like she could see them, but they weren't there. She could sense their presence. And the way she described it to me felt very much like the way nightmarish figures appear to me in bad dreams. It really does seem like a waking nightmare. Like whatever it is that your brain is doing when you're having a bad dream, it's doing when you're awake. And it feels inexplicable. We almost don't have the language for it because most of us aren't experiencing that in our day-to-day lives. Why would we need to talk about it? But for her, those specters or those figures were very real. She would see, I remember she pointed to a crack in the paint in a room that she was in. And she said, "Oh, that's a message that this person that she thought was stalking her left for me. He's leaving me this message. He wants me to see that and think this other thing." So, yeah, definitely visual, verbal, all of the above. But I think the way she's experiencing them might not be the way that we experience that kind of sensory input normally.
And when your mom would be in a state like that, what was usually your response? How did you manage it in the moment?
It's terrifying. I mean, I did some classes at NAMI, the National Alliance for Mental Illness, which is also incredibly helpful. They provide classes for loved ones to support their relatives who are dealing with schizophrenia, and then they have a support group. And what they would always say is just try and reassure them, like support them, like help them like make sure that they know that you're on their team. So I wouldn't say, "Oh, that's not happening." I would say, "Okay, tell me more about that. How is that? How is that making you feel? How is it manifesting?" And the idea would then to sort of slowly be able to convince them that either to get help or to understand that what they were seeing wasn't real. So I would really try and just make sure that she felt like we were on the same team because everyone around her was contradicting her. My grandmother and my aunt were not really, especially my grandmother. She's a very rational person, so it wasn't easy for her to provide that kind of support. But I think internally I was constantly freaking out, like what's going on?
And how did you take care of yourself during that time?
I don't know that I did. But I would say, if I were giving advice to someone else, it's like really let your friends and loved ones be there for you. Really, like allow yourself to be cared for and loved, and because that can be really hard, I think, for people who come from households like mine. Like just kind of let your guard down a little bit and let people understand that you're in pain and help however they can.
That's excellent advice. What I'm also hearing you just talk about is the importance of, for young people that might be in this situation with a parent or a sibling, is they've got to go out and find other supports. And it sounds like it's critical for them to read up on this, learn about it, so that they can learn that this is a mental illness and not them. Because what you're describing can be very erratic behavior. It's unpredictable. You never know what you're going to get, and that can be quite challenging for a child to be in that situation, to not know what they're going to get. And if it's not because a parent's on alcohol or drugs and the erratic behavior is just because, it's certainly a sure sign that something may not be right.
And it can be hard because a lot of people don't want to recognize that severe mental illness is as common as it is. So sometimes I would be telling friends when I was younger stories about things that had happened to me, and they would, laugh or be like, "Oh, that's so weird." I mean, and I would be like, "Oh, yeah, I guess it's just not that big of a deal." Like people do tend to minimize it, and not out of malevolence or anything like that, but just it's safer and easier for our own brains to not believe this kind of thing is happening all the time. So, for me, it wasn't until I encountered one or two friends who said to me, hey, what was happening to you when you were a kid wasn't okay. The way she treated you was wrong. You didn't deserve that. And then I had another friend who said, it sounds like it might be borderline personality disorder. You should read this article. She had a friend who'd written an article on Slate or something about mothers with borderline personality disorder. But it took a long time and a lot of conversations to get to somebody who said that, who actually heard what I was talking about and was able to give me that. So I do want, I hope I want to just make sure that people, if it feels like you're experiencing something really terrible, you probably are. It's not nothing.
I'm really glad you said that. Can you tell us a couple of the stories that you're referring to that you would talk to your friends about or they would find out about and how they reacted? What are a couple of those for our listeners?
Probably the worst thing that happened that's in my book is when I was 11 or 12, I broke a window in my house accidentally because I was angry with my mom because our dogs needed dog food and she got mad at me for asking for her to go get food. And so I threw something at the window and I was a really good kid. I never did stuff like that. And she came back and she took our dogs and dropped them off in a parking lot. She like drove me to a parking lot and dropped them off and drove away. And I was too young to know what to do. I didn't know how to we didn't have the internet back then in the way where I could post for a lost dog, or I didn't have anyone I could call to ask me to go back. And I was also terrified because it was just such a cruel thing to do. I loved our dogs so much and she just abandoned them. And yeah, that was like the worst thing that had ever happened to me as a kid. And that I didn't really talk to many people about that for a long time because I thought it was my fault. I thought, oh, I broke this window. I deserve this. But now that I am an adult and I've been able to do some research, it turns out that that kind of thing is fairly common. Parents in this situation will often take away the thing that their kid loves the most and do what they can to destroy it. And she just did that over and over.
Wow, that's a lot to bear.
No, I just wanted to share it because I've learned since that it's pretty common that this kind of thing with borderline moms and pets, it's like this is a situation that comes up again and again in my research. So
And what do you think that's about?
I think it's something with my mom, at least. I think she's echoing her own loss. I think the loss of her father probably is what triggered all of this. I'm sure she was genetically predisposed to it as well, but she's just repeating that trauma and that sense of insecurity and instability that she felt growing up her whole life. She sort of felt like she needed to pass on to me, and I don't even think it was conscious. I think it would have to have been conscious for her to decide not to do that, but I don't think she knew how hurt she was. So I think she was kind of unconsciously reproducing old patterns.
So were there times that you were afraid for your safety growing up?
All the time. But I think one thing is that when you're a kid, you don't know that everyone's life is not like that.
Yeah.
So I just figured everyone secretly had an angry and violent mother, and the people around me were functioning okay and they weren't being killed. So I figured I'd be fine. Like all I had to do, I really was just sort of dead set on getting into a really good school and getting out of Houston. And I figured as long as I could do that, then when I was an adult, I could just leave and not come back. So I was more focused on that. But yeah, all the time. I mean, it was really scary in my household.
And do you remember there being any kind of moment where you cross that line between, hey, I think this is just the way life is. You're not even really thinking that. You're just living your life as a child, to when you realized, oh, something's not right.
In college, I had a friend, one of my best friends, who also plays a big role in the book, said to me, that's not normal. Like what you're describing is not normal. And it was because I was really depressed in college to the point where I was sick. I had an eating disorder. It kind of got to the point where I couldn't get out of bed and I wasn't going to classes and I was suicidal. And I didn't really understand why. I wasn't making the connection with my childhood at all. But I had a close friend who really took it upon herself to take care of me and kind of moved into my apartment and just kind of made sure I didn't kill myself. And it kind of came out then, some of the stuff about my childhood. And she just said, I didn't know. I didn't know. And that shouldn't have happened. And that's not normal. And that's not okay. And it had never occurred to me to really talk about it with my friends because I don't know. I just assumed other people's childhoods were similar. I don't know. It just didn't feel special to me in any way.
So that time in college where you referenced the major depression that you had, was that the first time you had felt that, or was that something familiar to you?
I think starting maybe junior year, I remember getting really, really sad and crying a lot and not really being able to name why. Um, I studied abroad my junior year to kind of try and get away from home. My school had a student exchange program where I went to France for a year, and I just remember being so sad. Well, like the whole time I was there and wanting to, I loved it. I loved it. Of course, it was a great privilege and opportunity to be there, but I would just cry all the time. And I thought it was because I was so cold because I grew up in Texas and I was in northern France and it was freezing. And but it wasn't. I never knew why I was so sad. And then the same thing happened in college. And that again, I was like, oh, it's because I went to Brown and Providence is really cold. And I was like, oh, I just don't have the right coat. Or I don't have the right shoes. I just didn't know because now I can be in the cold and be fine, you know. I didn't know that it was something else.
And when did you figure that out? That, oh, yeah, that might have been some depression I was feeling there, not the cold.
I mean, I would go see a therapist and I would try and they would all say, you know, you have depression and if you should take antidepressants and I would and I still do. But I don't think I actually believed it. I didn't really believe anything was really wrong with me. I think what ended up happening, I mean, really it was writing this book that helped me put all of that together more than anything. That helped me sort of see the kind of nodes in the story and the links between them and how one led to the other. Like, for example,
Yeah.
I'll say, as an adult, I spend a lot of my time at volunteering with LA Animal Services. I'm at the animal shelter pretty much every day, as much as I can. And I give, as soon as I started making money as a TV writer, I was giving as much as I could to animal rescue organizations and, you know, spending time transporting animals. And I had not put together that it was because of what happened to my dogs when I was a little kid. I didn't think about that like at all. I was like, I've recruited my husband into basically starting an animal nonprofit from our house. We're constantly fostering. This is what I want to spend all my time doing. And I just had not put together that it was because of what happened to my dogs. And that kind of thing kind of came together while I was writing this book and while I was doing ketamine therapy.
Yeah, that's a great insight to have.
Sometimes just writing everything out helps you see kind of things that you are not able to think through properly, but once
Yes.
they're in words on the page, you do start to see the patterns.
How do you see what you went through as a child and your mom's schizophrenia? How has it affected you and how you show up in relationships?
It's hard for me to trust people, and I do often feel like if I make one mistake, it's going to be over. I mean, I've been with my husband since 2009. Was that 16 years or something? We've been married for 6 years, and I still think if we get into a fight or he says something and it pisses me off and I get mad, that it's over. And it's like it's not over. We've been together for almost 2 decades, and I can be snappy. I can be mean. I think I get my feelings hurt really easily, and that was something ketamine therapy helped me out. I'm very defensive. I'm very much kind of always ready to fight back because I think I had to fight a little bit. I had to fight a lot for myself and my own safety when I was a kid. And but luckily, you know, my husband is truly the best person I know, and he comes from a family of therapists. His parents are literally experts in child development. They are chairs of their respective departments at Tufts and BC, and they're amazing, and they have kind of they're my in-laws, but I feel like they're my de facto parents, and they've raised these amazing children and grandchildren, and so Justin, he just gets it. Like I don't know how I could be in a functional relationship with anyone else, but he's I don't know, he's just very consistent. And
That's
I will say
great.
also like that is something too that I would tell people is like let yourself fall in love with somebody who understands you because that's probably made the biggest difference in my own I don't want to say healing, but my own evolution, I guess, becoming the person that I wanted to be in adulthood. It's not always something you can get through by yourself when you're dealing with a mentally ill parent, and you shouldn't try.
Yeah, it sounds like he's really able to give you the space to be who you are. Is there anything in particular that he does when you're feeling particularly, ornery or just down and out or in a mood?
He just doesn't reflect it back to me. If
Mm.
and that's so difficult to do, but his
Yeah, that
knee-jerk
really
reaction
is.
is not, if I'm being mean, is not to be mean back to me. It's to kind of stay level until I stop. Almost like a parent with a little kid, like he knows what it is. He doesn't take it personally. He doesn't internalize it. He knows who he is. And he kind of just, I don't know, he's just always present and there and conscious of what's going on. And it's just the best gift. I feel so grateful for that.
Sometimes when people see a family member going through mental health struggles, sometimes they'll be afraid, wow, is this going to happen to me? Will I express my mental health issues this way? Tell me some of those conversations you had to have with yourself about that.
Yeah, so this is another thing where I really had to write it through to figure out what was going on. And I ended up, I, I mean, kind of when the book came out last year, I wrote an essay about this for The Guardian about sort of wondering if my husband would be disappointed if we didn't have kids, if I would be disappointed if I didn't have kids. The idea of having a child, the idea of another person in my body kind of viscerally repulses me. And I don't know if that's related to my relationship with my mom or my own sort of issues around contamination and cleanliness. I don't know, but I did worry, if I have a kid, it seems like I'm okay, but my mom's not okay. My grandmother is okay, but her mom was definitely not okay. So does that mean my kid will not be okay? And am I willing to bring a child into this world knowing that that could be the case? Like the level of misery that I have seen impact my mother. Am I willing to do that to another person? And in the end, I did choose not to. And I think that's okay. I'm okay not having kids. I think my life is great. I think my life would be great if I did have children. I love my nieces and nephews so much, but I'm not I'm not willing to do that. And I do want to say that that's an okay choice to make.
Yeah, it's definitely an okay choice to make, and it sounds like you're doing it with full intention. What have you taken from your mom that's been good?
When she was being kind to me, she treated me like a queen. Like nobody was smarter, nobody was more beautiful, nobody was going to be more accomplished. I said I wanted to be a writer when I was young. She was like, "You're going to be a writer. We're going to do everything we can to make sure that happens." And she was always supportive of that. She always believed in me. I think that level of, to a degree, even though I know that that was part of her disorder, like the delusional confidence she had in me is why I had the kind of delusional confidence it takes to become a working adult writer and sustain that for long enough to have a career. I think she told me I could do it, and I really believed it because she was my mom, and I believed the bad things, but I also believed the good things, and that was one of them.
And then what do you hope to leave behind that your mom brought? What do you hope to not continue in your relationships?
I think my mom thought that she had to do everything alone. I think she was a really lonely person and could not see how much we all loved her and wanted her to get better and wanted the best for her. And I can feel that tendency in myself when things are going wrong or when I'm hurt. I'll tend to hermit. I'll go into my office and I won't want to talk to anybody about what's going on. And I really try not to do that. I try to fight against that instinct when something's wrong or I'm sad. I try to talk to my husband about it or my family, or my friends, really make an effort to not isolate myself and to understand that my friends and the people who love me are there for me and I can be there for them. Because I do think that was kind of the root of a lot of it for her, just that moment as a teenager going into the closet when her father died. And she was alone. There was no one there for her. And I think she just got stuck there. And I was lonely. I was an only child. I was alone in our household as a kid. And it would have been really easy for me to carry that into adulthood. And I really try hard not to do that. And a lot of that is like, being in physical spaces with other people. Like I volunteer because I want to be around the other team of volunteers as much as I want to be around the dogs, for example. And with my book, I do as many in-person events as I can because I want to be around readers. I want to be talking to people. I think that's so important.
Really appreciate you sharing your experiences with us, being so vulnerable and open about your life. Just really appreciate you being on the show.
Thank you so much. This was a great conversation. I'm grateful to you for having me.
Sarah LaBrie's book, No One Gets to Fall Apart, is available wherever books are sold. I think Sarah's story is one of resilience. When a child grows up with a parent with a severe mental health illness such as schizophrenia and borderline personality disorder, there's absolutely no control the child has over their environment. They are constantly reacting to whatever is coming from that parent, and they have to develop very specific coping mechanisms to handle that. And clearly, from Sarah's story, I'm hearing from somebody who has really delved in to do research, to receive help, to read, to write, to do everything that she can to learn more about the things that were happening for her and how they relate to her life in general. And it's so fortunate that she had another support system with her aunt and her grandmother to help be there for her in times when her mother just could not be. And I think that this is a really important topic for people to understand, that when children do grow up with a parent with a severe mental health illness, they really don't know any different. They don't know what other family systems are like, what other parents are like. They become very vigilant to their environment and the experiences that they're having, and they have to learn to make sense of that for themselves. And what's important for children who grow up being parented by somebody with severe mental illness is that there's no recovery that's going to come from fixing that parent or that parent changing. Recovery has to come from an internal process, an internal therapeutic process where one has to reparent themselves, so to speak. They have to go out and do the work, whether that's through therapy, reading, writing, all of the things that Sarah did. She's essentially taken control over her therapeutic process to make sense out of her childhood. She's not going to get that from her mother. Unless her mother were to completely change with her own mental health illness, her mother is not going to be capable of giving to Sarah what she would possibly want from a separate childhood. And with that, I think it's really important that for those out there who are trying to seek that healing from their parent when they have a severe mental health illness, you may not get the answers that you're looking for. A parent with a severe mental illness or an individual with a severe mental impairment is not necessarily going to be able to change all of the things that they have done and the way they think and the decisions that they have made through time based on that chemistry and the brain functioning. So it becomes imperative that for children who have been in this situation to really take control of their healing, to go out and get the therapy and the treatments. Don't look to your family to fix that, to the parent to fix that. You find that spark within yourself to try to get that healing and to get that fix. And you can do that. You don't have to get it directly from your parent to heal and recover from those early familial experiences. And while it can be very challenging and hard, and it is very deep centered, very emotional work to try to understand one's childhood when they really have had no control over the environment of what the mental health issue brings to those relationships and to the experiences, you can still find that inner strength to learn everything you can about that mental illness and then juxtapose it against the experiences that you've had and the turmoil that perhaps that you've gone through and the tragedy, and do like what Sarah did, where she took that tragedy and turned it into healing for herself and understanding and acknowledgement. And she's been able to pull together, knowing the supports that she got from the stable people in her life and being able to position her mother's behavior and decisions and the experience at the hands of her relationship with her mother in the context of the mental health arena to which it sits. In This Family is produced by John Moe, and the music is provided by Jeremy Messersmith. You can learn more about Nexus by visiting nexusfamilyhealing.org. Thanks again for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, I hope you recommend In This Family to family and friends, post about us on social, and leave a rating or review. I'm Dr. Michelle K. Murray. See you next time.